Hello, this is Mike from Dimensional Walking, and today we're going to title this episode Changelings, Integral Children. Are they the same or very different? Okay, so that's an interesting mix, right? So last week I did a video on a fairy swarm that happened in northeastern part of Washington State. Okay, and while I was doing some research, besides the experiences and people I had witnessed and talked to, I also did a little bit of a background research, which I do in most of my videos. So, anyways, I came across this thing called chainlings. And chainlings are kind of a folklore that many years ago, hundreds of years ago, started out in Western Europe. And what it dealt with is chainlings are actually, according to folklore, these are the offspring of fairies, okay, and or trolls or elves, okay. Now, all of these things, trolls, fairies, and elves, for the most part, if you don't know, are kind of, I don't want to say they're hideous looking creatures, but as far as compared to humans, in our eyes, anyways, in our eyes, let's just put it that way, they aren't overly attractive, okay? Even though, and this is the same thing with mermaids, okay? You know, Hollywood has made the mermaids look really wonderful. And the reality is, and I've met some people that have actually seen mermaids, they're quite hideous looking. You know, really kind of awful looking, I guess, is the way they described it to me, and scary. So, anyways, chainlings are probably in that same vein. They probably don't look very attractive. So, anyways, in Western Europe, uh, when people, what would happen is the fairies would go ahead and exchange their um, uh, baby or whatever, or it would be a newborn basically, with one of the newborns of a fair skinned, maybe blonde hair human. Okay. And for some reason, of course, this is how this whole thing started out because this, you know, maybe this human baby also in their minds had maybe some other defects, birth defect type things, and maybe mentally challenged type things, and they always kind of blamed it on the fairies, the trolls, or the elves. Okay, so anyways, and of course we call them chainlings because they were exchanged. There was an exchange going on. So anyways, this would go on. Now, not only was it in European, now Scandinavia, Ireland was very heavily, this whole little legend went on. But also, the interesting enough, it was in Spain, in Malta. I've also heard it in India, even in China. The stories are a little different there, of course. And I even heard it in Africa, in Nigeria, about this. And I had a friend from Nigeria, and he told me about it many years ago. This kind of legend, strange legend. Um, so, anyways, you know, many of the characteristics of these changelings, they would always have this voracious appetite. They had a very bad temper, and they had kind of this greenish tint to their skin, and they disliked wearing shoes, and they were usually kind of beyond their years, and they actually were very difficult to handle. Okay, they were always, you know, getting into stuff, and then they also had some other interesting abilities. Um, they had ability to kind of shape shift into various kind of beings, including humans, more human, okay, than they actually looked, and they didn't look very human for the most part. And then some of them, of course, was quite scary because they talked about their very sharp teeth, and they had these kind of lamprey type mouths that could suck blood, and they had this super strength that was beyond human strength. So that made them a pretty formidable entity or being, I guess I would call them, to try to handle. So, and there was three reasons why, anyways, the fairies, trolls, or elves um, would take a child, okay, a human child, and exchange them. One of them was to make them a servant. Two would be to have the love of a human child, which I guess they felt was very special. And number three was malice or revenge. Maybe humans, a family or something, didn't do something they wanted. There's stories of Native American stories here, and I've talked to several of them. And I lived in the Four Corners area, where they would call them wee people. They would come at certain times of the year and ask for food. They would ask for things, and sometimes the Native Americans would give them some food or whatever they were looking for. But if they didn't, they would do some very malicious acts and things against them. So I'm thinking this is very similar to the Changeling legend. Okay. Now, as I talked about, and there was another little thing here about this. There was also a thing called Fairy Struck. I don't know if you ever heard of this. Was where if a child or a baby would suddenly become paralyzed, and I guess that happened in many hundreds of years ago. They would become paralyzed. Who knows exactly why? They would always blame it on the fairies. The humans would blame it on the fairies because that is called fairy struck. Okay, so there you go. So next, let's talk about indigo children, or crystal children, as some people call them. Now, are they sort of similar in some ways? And I say yes, they are. Now, indigo children basically would be considered kind of an upgrade, okay, to the humanity, okay? They had all kinds of, indigo children were very smart, they were very strong, and in many cases they were very difficult to handle. Now, I've talked to a lot of people in the past about indigo children, okay? When I lived in Arizona and New Mexico, I had some contact with families that had indigo children. And one woman, I will tell you, actually had a child in which was very difficult. The child was very difficult to handle, and so they had to take it to a place somewheres in Colorado. It was kind of a small town, and it specialized in taking care of. It was like a school, an academy of some sort, and they would take the child there. In fact, this particular child became so kind of violent, okay, that it actually had to be removed from this academy up in Colorado because of the strange things it was doing. It actually, the story goes, it had actually torn out some desks and actually picked up desks, which they were just absolutely frightened, the people that were running the school, because they never saw a small child. I think the kid was probably 6 or 7 years old, and he was picking up these pretty heavy desks that only adults could probably do, and he was throwing them across the room. So the parents were called right away, and they had to take the child back home again. So it was a crazy story. It really was. But anyways, so here we go. We have the changelings from the past, and we have the indigo children from the present. Okay, so I wrote an article many years ago about the indigo children, and basically I didn't compare them to the changelings at that time, but I just talked about the indigo children. So indigo children, I think, are like these upgrades, okay? Because basically, except for some of the control problems, they're really smart, and many of them are very kind and wonderful, okay? So I always call them as an upgrade. Now, the changelings are kind of the opposite, okay? I think they're really the opposite. Some people will say that they're kind of one and the same, changelings from the past, and now we have the upgrade group, called the indigo or crystal children. So Anyways, so I'm just going to read you a little bit a part of my of the end of my article I wrote for Truth Seeker Forum, and I said, whoever is doing the changing, okay, please help us stop our extinction before our time runs out. Okay, so I'm hoping that the Indigo children are the positive, where the changelings probably were not. Okay, and I know the changelings, you're going to say, well, that was just a legend. And some people really thought it was real, and of course that was several hundred years ago, and etc. So, anyways, with that said, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Bye bye.